So, the question to ask is, how do we survive the fellowship when we're talking about being a watchman on the wall? And whether we point something out or not can be a life or death issue. And end-time prophecy, the sealing, when people have made their final choice because we have a free will, and they've either been covered with Christ's righteousness and freed from sin and different problems we have versus not. These are not easy questions to ask. You can see as you see things posted on Facebook that people deal with this in a number of ways, some of which seem not at all good, okay? So I'm going to come to the most problematic text that people use, which is about the tares in the wheat in Matthew 13, starting in verses 24 and going to verse 30, and then it goes from verse 34 on. So I'm going to start. Jesus gave a parable, and he said that the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. And so these tares grew up, and they grew up with the wheat, and you couldn't tell when they were young plants which was a tare and which was a wheat. And so then the harvesters came and said, the servants of the man said, wilt you then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up the wheat with the tares. They were told not to try to sort out who was a tare and who was a wheat. Many people err on this. Verse 30, let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers to gather up first the tares and bind them into bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. So who tells them when to gather the wheat and the tares? The person who was in charge, meaning God. Okay. So, and who is the enemy? Well, it says, going to verse 39, the enemy that sold them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. And in verse 34 it says that all these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable spake he not unto them. We are dealing with end-time prophecy that also is spoken in parables and in symbology. And another reason that he said this was in verse 35, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. This is what's happening with end-time Bible prophecy. So I'm going to leave it to you to study this more, but I want to point out that we are not the ones who separate the wheat from the tares. What happens is a process of free will and choice as you read this, and there's a role that we're to play and not play, and this is where many people make a mistake. And as we consider this, I want to point out a phrase that's often used in codependency recovery, but it also applies here. God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the person I can, and the wisdom to know that that person is me. So I'm going to hold this up here so that you can read this and see it more clearly. And I'm going to say a few words about this. As you study these verses and you consider how to survive, ask this question in this prayer. Not that this prayer supplements the Bible, but as you read the Bible, what is the Bible saying about this? What is our role and what is it? What is our role not to be? Think about these things because we're talking about surviving the fellowship. It's a difficult period in history. We're talking about staying in recovery in Jesus, and we're moving to talking about the polarization that many of us have seen, with that some PTSD. So I'm going to come back, I'm going to turn this off, I'm going to talk more about those issues, and I'm going to highlight some previous videos that I've posted that also give information about this. Thank you for sharing your time with me.